welcome. We're so glad that you guys are here today. I am a pediatrician here in Kingsport and have been a pediatrician for over a decade. Have two kids of my own who are now in the teens and tweens. And really, it's I think probably my expertise in parenting in this preschool age kind of comes from a lot of the literature that I've read over time, some of my medical training, a lot of my practical experience in kind of seeing preschoolers in the medical setting and hearing about it otherwise. So we're really excited to present this info to you guys, and hopefully there will be some little nuggets that you can take home and put to use.
My name is Cherese. I've been a nurse for 27 years. I also have 5 kiddos. They range in age from 13 to 23. I cheated a little bit in there because I have 2 sets of twins. So nothing like double preschool puzzles over and over again. And yes, I would agree. We've seen a lot in practice, we've seen a lot at home, and so I feel like we bring a combination of both practical, research-based, and kind of what that looks like. So feel free to ask us questions from any angle, but we are super excited to be here. I love the preschool age. It is one of my favorite age groups, and I know that's a lot like saying childbirth was not a big deal. I am far from it, but hopefully we can give a little bit of background on just developmental stages and some explanations of why they are a bunch of weirdos sometimes. So,
yes,
okay.
For sure. So if you'll go ahead and move us to our first slide. So we'll start with puzzle number 1, the bedroom escape artist. So little Johnny keeps getting out of his bed after being tucked in at night. He's always been a mama's boy, and he routinely comes and asks for an extra hug or a drink. Have any of you experienced a similar issue with your kiddos? Any hand? A show of hands? I see heads nodding. Yeah. Okay. So we got some hands here. Anyone want to share an experience or how you navigated a sleep issue? Any brave souls out there?
For our first kid, I turned it over to Kevin for a week.
Okay. How did that go?
It was good because Kevin was the hard rule, no stay in bed, and then I came back in a week later.
Okay. I love that.
We haven't figured out for our daughter yet, though.
Okay. Yeah. So 2 points that I'm hearing from you there. One is that your kids are different, right? So what worked for your first one that approach may not work the same for your second one, right? And sometimes parents are different in their parenting styles. So that's actually one of our takeaway points here, that, in parenting, each of you probably have a different tolerance for a child's discomfort and for an amount of crying that you can stand and maintain your sanity. So I think that's something that's really important to take into consideration. So thank you for sharing.
I think also a good point that you brought up is all of our kids react differently to each parent in each situation. So you said he's the harder, line parent, and you didn't keep going on that. But I would venture to guess that that's also dependent on the situation, right? So maybe when it comes to sleep issues, he's like, I'm exhausted, I have to get up for work, this is a thing. But when it comes to, maybe just one more popsicle, it's like, it's one more popsicle, right? And so just openly looking at the situation and realizing every kid is different, parents are different per situation. So I think that's just a realistic way to see that too.
Yes, for sure. So one of the things that we know from research is that it's really important to establish healthy sleep patterns in kids. And there's not really one magical way to do that. So if you came looking for like, okay, here's exactly how we're going to do sleep, here's exactly how we're going to do potty, here's exactly how we're going to do this, you might leave feeling like, oh man. But also I think that we've really learned over time that so much of it is really specific to what your parenting style is and what the temperament of your child is. So we've seen lots of different approaches to sleep. I think we get a lot of questions about cry it out. Like, when do I start sleep training? How long is it safe for them to cry? Those kinds of questions. And I have found that oftentimes you don't even have to go down that pathway if you can take a really close look at what your sleeping habits are. So one of the areas that we often look at is called sleep hygiene. And that is basically the fancy name for, like, what does your bedtime routine look like? So we had a toddler, or not a toddler, pardon me, a 4-year-old recently who the mom was really struggling with her sleep. She's like, I can't get her to sleep. She comes out of bed so many times at night. She comes into my bedroom. She's begging for me to do one more thing, and we can't do it anymore. And it was to the point that the dad or the mom's significant other was sleeping at the bedroom door so that the child couldn't get to mom. And so sometimes we do things that we're like, we're so desperate for a solution. But ultimately, we just took a look at what their bedtime routine was, and it was really overcomplicated. So they first did the bath, and then they let her sit on the bed and watch a show for 20 or 30 minutes, and then they were taking care of their toddler, right? Because you've got to balance your family priorities. And then they'd come back, and it seemed like in her routine there wasn't like a gentle wind down. So when you're looking at your sleep routine for preschool age kids, I definitely recommend turning screens off 30 minutes before your desired bedtime. That's huge. It just helps the brain wind down. I love using light and dark as a cue to teach kids' bodies that, like, okay, it's getting darker around here. It's my brain is telling me it's time to go to bed. So if you can switch to just a lamp or a nightlight or something like that, that helps, that boosts that natural melatonin production. So you're not having to like give melatonin gummies at bedtime. And then reading a book or telling a story or scratching a back or singing a song, any of those things can really kind of help get kids into the mode of sleep. So let me make sure about our other points.
I think also doing part of that routine in the room with the child with low lighting as part of that. So it's almost like they need a little bit of closure to that separation. I'm going to be in my room for hours. You're going to be in your room for hours. Rather than just, okay, we read the books downstairs, you had your snack, you brushed your teeth, lights off, good night, say prayers, see ya. It's almost like they need, at that age, just like, pull back easy, guys, pull back easy. And that doesn't have to be 30 minutes. That can be 3 minutes. But just that kind of stepped down of, and now we're done. Okay?
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's really important for parents to be kind of thinking in the back of their brains, like, why is my kid acting this way at bedtime? For some families, they come and say, my kid is pinging off the wall. So as soon as we say, time to go up and brush your teeth, and a lot of those things developmentally can be rooted in a little bit of separation anxiety, and that's where they need that little bit of space and that feeling of connection with us. Sometimes kids in this age can really commonly be dealing with nightmares or night terrors, and that can make sleep scary. And then they're also still learning skills of self-soothing and how to like feel comfortable in their own space. And then, of course, consistency is key. So across pretty much all the areas of parenting, you're going to find that like the more consistent you can be, kids need those boundaries. They need those set expectations. So yeah, I think those are some of our big things on sleep. So we'll move to our next puzzle. Let's see here. I feel like we could probably do an hour on each puzzle.
We could,
so we're
on each puzzle.
trying to be mindful of your time today. Do you want to lead this one? You're welcome to.
This is a fan favorite, guys. That's why you're all here, let's be honest. Okay, Ava watches screen time after daycare while her parents prepare dinner. Anytime Ava is asked to turn off her iPad, she asks to watch it just a little bit longer. Also, we put the very kindest wording here possible because we all know that Ava may or may not ask for more time. She may just have a complete meltdown when you would suggest such horrid things as turning off the iPad. So this kind of comes back to, well, first, has anyone been there? Yes? Has anyone not been there? Anyone want to share how they get through this on the daily at their house? Yeah.
So more recently we have he's learned more of, okay, a timer.
Great.
We've done that. Or we'll say, okay, he's all about 2 minutes lately, but 2 or 5 minutes. And then we say, okay, now you turn it off. And we let him turn it off, and then that has helped.
That's great.
I love that, giving him some power over that. I love that. Yes.
Yeah, so things as simple as like a timer and just allowing that independence and feeling like the child is in control of that is so appropriate for that level of development. So we love that.
Because at that age, it definitely feels to them like they're always out of control. You know, I mean, now it's time to go do this and time to go do that. And, you know, I just want to watch this. So I love giving some power, no matter how real or perceived that is. So one of the biggest things about screen time, and this is another buzzword you'll hear with a lot of these puzzles, is boundaries. And kids do need boundaries. And they really aren't just arbitrary, just because I'm your mom and I said so, and this is what we're doing today. The boundaries you're establishing now are huge for multiple reasons. One is there's good research to back it. So the Academy of Pediatrics actually says that the guidelines for screen time amount is 0 to 18 months, none. Let's be real. I'm telling you the guidelines. And ages 2 to 5, less than an hour. Get this. And it should be high quality educational content with a parent. So you can explain, Miss Rachel. That said, I love me some Bluey, and I've been known to be sitting there still watching it after my niece leaves. But so that's where the science is, right? And so let's talk about the real life application. And that is boundaries that they learn now will carry them through. Because in about 5 minutes, they're going to have to set their own boundaries. And I don't know about you, but I'm 50 years old, and I have trouble setting boundaries on my phone. And so there was no one to teach me that when I was a kid. Because as previously mentioned, I'm 50 years old. There was no phone like that when I was a kid. So I don't have a point of reference. And if we can kind of instill that in the kids now, like, this is awesome and fun, and it's not scary, and there's a great big life out there, and this is part of it, and now we're going to move on to the next part of life. So establishing those boundaries and sticking with them. And then also recognizing when we're outside of those boundaries, looking at why we are. So are we using it as a tool? Yes, I am. To soothe, to distract. It's great for those things. And we want these kids to learn that there's other ways to do that too, right? So we've had kids come to our office and they cannot sit through us just looking in their ears unless they have a screen in front of them. Well, we would love to talk them through that and teach them some coping skills so that when they go to the doctor for the rest of their lives, they have some coping. And if we're always just giving the device, we're taking away that opportunity from them. So there is a mix. It's great in the car, and if the battery dies, we're not just going to end the trip halfway there, right? So what are some other ways? What are some other things? And just keeping our eyes on, this is a part of life, it's a big life. And then a really big one, not before bedtime. So there is great research on what that light in that screen does to our brains. They are smart, y'all. They are so smart. And that blue light wakes us up, gives us some good old dopamine, and we want more. And that's at 5 or 2.5 or 50. So a couple tips, making sure minimum 30 minutes before bed, even an hour if you can do it, no screen. Let that brain kind of come back down. And anytime the child is using the screen, if you go into your settings on brightness, it actually does make a difference. So the lowest brightness that kid can see the screen, just try to keep it there because it does give less stimulation. And that's true for us too, fun fact. And then also, as far as the content goes, we're not naive to think that you're going to sit there with your child while they watch it. What's the point of that? You're trying to cook dinner. But there are great websites to visit, like Common Sense Media.
Yeah. On Common Sense Media, I love that website. I don't know if you guys have ever been to it, but it's definitely something I would jot down. You can go there as a parent and type in the name of a book, an app, a movie, a show, like whatever it is, and it gives you some feedback. So if you're just looking for, how do I know if this is appropriate, age appropriate for my child? What are the risks in this? They will tell you if there's violence. They will tell you if there's sexual content, if there's language, if it's a risk for kids to go down a rabbit hole and get stuck, right? If it causes frustration quickly in video games or things like that. So when our kids were in this age group, they're like, hey, can I get this app? And I would say, I will take a look into that. If you'll give me a little bit of time, I will look at it and I'll get back to you and let you know. And they just learned that is how we do it. And so that gave me an opportunity to screen some of those things instead of in the moment just saying like, yeah, sure, you can play, what is it, Royal Quest or something, Candy Crush, I don't know. So I think just for a tool to look at what content is appropriate, that is a good resource. It's not perfect, but it will give you at least a starting point to consider what you value and what you want your kid to be able to see at a certain age. Okay, we could also go all day on screen time, but we'll try and wrap that one up.
We need a whole preschool parenting conference.
Yeah, right. Okay, and we'll just move on to puzzle number 3. Grocery store run goes sour. We might already get some hands raising just based on the title. So little Ella joined her mom for a trip to the grocery store. She started riding in the buggy, but became bored of that and wanted to walk along. When she wasn't allowed to pick out a doll from the toy aisle, she started to escalate. Okay, anyone been there or done that? Yeah? Okay, we got one hand here. Maybe, I also realized that if you guys have 3 to 5-year-olds, these are pandemic kids, right? So many of them may not have had a lot of trips to the grocery store because you might just have your groceries delivered to your front door or pick them up and not get them out of the car. But, definitely when kids are starting to get to the point that you're like, oh, we're going to have a tantrum. Probably everyone has been there and seen that. So as we were preparing this, we talked about whether or not we had ever just abandoned the buggy in the store.
Raise your hand if you've done it, please, because I've done it.
We have.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, these
Where
kids
you're like,
haven't. These kids haven't been to the store enough.
They haven't. Not worth it.
So
we will order pizza. It is not worth it.
Yeah, exactly. So We wanted to talk a little bit about tantrums and why they occur. So, believe it or not, it is developmentally normal for 2 to 5 year olds to, in that age range, at least 85% of them will have at least one tantrum per month. Okay? When I saw that statistic, I was like, just one?
That's what I said. I was like, where did I
Because-
go wrong? Yeah.
My oldest was like expert level at tantrums. It was a massive challenge for us in parenting because she would just dig her heels in, and it was like there was nothing we could do to get her to come back down. And there are so many different approaches to tantrums. You know, sometimes we'll see parents whose child just starts like throwing a fit in the floor, and they will just step over them and, you know, act like nothing's happening. So definitely we see some of that approach. We see it all. I mean, I think the opposite approach of that would be the parent who scoops their child up and holds them until they come to a more calm and regulated state. And I remember just thinking, like, I could have never held my daughter when she was in that state. It would have been a risk to my health. But, you know, there are lots of different approaches, but really tantrums originate from this inability for preschoolers to regulate their emotions. So usually they're happening because a child is frustrated that they can't get what they want. So you mentioned the, like, across the street. Do you want to share that?
So, well, I have a couple kids that were expert level tantrumers, and with our oldest that had the challenge with that, I remember reading an article. I was just trying to ingest anything I could find because I was losing my mind, and I had 3 kids within a 2-year period. I was losing it, and this description was perfect to me because I was like, I don't understand why one of the 3 is just like blah. And it said, imagine you see your best friend from high school and you're walking down Broad Street and they're on the opposite sidewalk in Broad Street. You're like, oh, hey, Carol, hey. And she just keeps walking. You're like, Carol, hey. And she doesn't hear you. So then you start waving your arms. She doesn't look. Then you start jumping up and down. And she's like, I don't know. And you're not getting the response you're looking for, which is like, if she knows me, we were locker mates. Like, come on. And then next thing you know, you're looking around like, is there a neon sign? What can I use? Like, I can't let Carol go. I haven't seen her in years. And you're screaming and jumping up and down with this neon sign, Carol. That's a child having a tantrum. They rarely go from like just sitting there to, ah! But they're not getting the response that they want. And they're going to keep escalating in hopes of getting that response. That is developmentally normal for them.
Yes.
That's the bad news.
Yes. Sorry. The good news, however, is that tantrums are preventable at least a little bit. Okay? And what I mean by that is, like, if we go back and we look at Ella here, right? She started riding in the buggy, she got bored, and she wanted to walk along, right? So we might have been able to head that off by looking at our game plan in advance, right? So we might decide, okay, my kid cannot make it through the full grocery run, so I'm going to make another plan in order to do the full grocery run, but I do want to experiment with a 15-minute grocery run, right? I don't know how long it takes everyone to get groceries. You guys probably get your groceries to your door, but anyhow, you could plan what is appropriate for your child to tolerate, right? So I can't expect a child in this age group to just be willing to sit perfectly still and ride along the entire time if there's nothing in it for them, right? And we can also set the expectation with kids because they like to feel that sense of control. So if we say, okay, Ella, we're going to the store, and when we go in, your job is to ride in the buggy. and you get to ride in the buggy through the entire time in the store, and I want you to stay in the buggy. And while you're in the buggy, I need your help picking out the greenest apples. I want you to point to me the greenest apples, or whatever it might be. So if we can kind of involve them and try and make it like slightly fun here and there, then we can set that expectation and prevent her from like completely losing it and tipping the buggy over, right? And then she wasn't allowed to pick out a doll from the toy aisle. So we can set that expectation, and we can use consistency as much as possible. So if kids always associate a grocery run with, I am getting a toy, and then the one time that you're like, oh, the budget's tight this month, you just had Christmas, you've got more toys everywhere, I tripped on your toy this morning, you're not getting a toy today, then your kid is kind of like, wait, this didn't make sense to me, because every time I've come, I got a toy. So, we have to think of where they are coming from in a developmental sense. And I think that can be really helpful. And it gets really tricky when grandparents are like, oh, every time I take you to the store, you get a cookie from the deli counter, you get a toy. And so anyway, while this example may not be perfectly applicable, I would encourage you all to consider places in your life that you can take your kids in short spurts and figure these skills out, because they have to learn some self-regulation, some self-discipline. We have to teach them these skills, and if we don't, then we end up getting to kindergarten entry and we're like, oh, well, they've never had to practice waiting for something. I think teaching that tolerance is one of the key jobs of parenthood. So, okay.
And I would just add really quickly, you brought up a good point about sometimes the grocery looks different with grandparents. And as a parent, I found that hard to navigate with my first crew. And I wanted to be careful not to do that from a place of shame. I didn't want my kids to feel shame that, well, grandma always gets me a toy, or maybe I shouldn't tell you that grandma, or like it was this secretive thing. So instead, when that came up, we would say, I love that you have so many people in your life, and obviously age appropriate words, but so many people in your life, and that each experience is different. And that when you have that special time with grandma at the store, that's something you all do together. And when we go to the store, you're my special helper and you do this with me, And then the last thing I would add as someone who lived through a lot of tantrums is reminding yourself that they have the attention span of a gnat and using that to your advantage. So before you get to the neon sign and the screaming up and down, when you see it start to, but I want to get out of the buggy. It's like, what? They have Valentine's out already? It's December. Isn't that so silly? Isn't Valentine's Day? So distract and redirect.
Yes, distraction and redirection are key for
Yes.
kids in this age group. Okay, let's see our next one. Okay. Do you want to lead this one, or do you want me to?
You can.
Okay. Okay, so this child just cannot seem to get along when hanging out with other kids. So Joey is an active and fun-loving kid at home, but at birthday parties or in Sunday school, he seems to have trouble getting along with other kids. He always ends up hurting someone, getting put into timeout, or talking back to authority figures. Now, you don't have to raise your hand if this is your child, but perhaps you are aware of some child who just seems like, God, that one is always so wild or always getting into trouble. I don't know has anyone had experience in that arena or heard from other parents who are dealing with that? Maybe some, a few nods here and there. Okay. So I think one of the big things here that we're kind of looking at is that Joey seems to be in a different place with his developmental skills than where some of the other kids are. Okay. And so the catch-all term for this that we kind of wanted to touch on is called neurodiverse. Okay. And while that is kind of like the big term for now, I'm sure the term will change over time. but based on the research, we believe that somewhere between 15 and 30% of kids and adults fall somewhere into this spectrum of being what we call neurodiverse. And really, in short, it just means that their brains work a little bit differently than the other percent of people. And sometimes that can be such a beautiful advantage. And in some cases, it can make things difficult for them to feel like they completely fit in with society's expectations of their behavior, especially in the preschool years. So oftentimes, these kids in this age group are learning a ton of developmental skills. They are learning things like, how do we cooperate with other kids? How do we share? How do we listen? And often as parents, it's difficult to just teach that at home. I mean, kids naturally will share something to you and then they'll take it back. And they learn among siblings, but it's different when they're learning that in a group setting of kids, right? And so this is something that a lot of parents are thinking about as their kid is either entering preschool, entering kindergarten, things like that. Like, how does my kid fit in with the preschool hierarchy of, the way that things go? And I think oftentimes a kid like Joey in this example, there might actually be some sort of medical diagnosis that is not yet determined. So it hasn't yet been figured out. But we may find in the future for Joey that he turns out to be a kid who may have ADHD or ADD. He may end up having some anxiety, which we see a lot. He may end up having some type of like a mild version of autism spectrum disorder. So there's lots of kids who may kind of fall into this bucket. And for parents, they often just feel helpless. Like, I don't know how to help my kid behave in a better way when they're in this situation. And so often here we're looking at kind of building an alliance with folks who can help you solve some of these issues for your kid. So sometimes it would be things like, I know one resource that a lot of parents love is, has anyone seen Dr. Becky on social media? Okay, we got some yeses. So she talks about deeply feeling kids. That's kind of like one of her big topics of discussion. And she talks about the fact that when some kids feel these deep feelings of guilt or shame or disappointment or things that we consider to be negative feelings, they can't regulate themselves. And so they act out in a particular way. So here it might be that, Joey is upset that someone took a toy from someone else and he feels like that was an injustice to the other child. And so Joey takes it into his own hands and is like, that wasn't right. And so he goes and punishes the kid himself. And really that's coming from like a place of emotional maturity, yet he doesn't have the skill to regulate when he's feeling that this was such a harsh injustice that you took that from her and that wasn't right and the teacher didn't see it, so I'm going to take care of it. And then he hits the other kid, right? So it's not that these kids are always wrong in what they're doing, but sometimes they're misunderstood in where they're coming from. And so I think looking into why a child is doing this is really going to give us some insight so that these kids don't end up constantly being told, no, what you did was bad, what you did was wrong. And then they start to feel like, well, I just can't be good, so I'm a bad kid. And they take on that persona and it carries through. And we want them to know that they are loved. Yes?
Dr. Becky, and also just from personal experience, one of the things she always suggests is never confront your child about that in front of the rest of his group,
Yes.
the rest of the people. You want to take them away from that situation. You want to, okay, we'll talk about it, separate them to where they can have it with you. That way you are not having any other influence, you're not having any embarrassment, you're also not having any authority figure that is doing this contribute, because you need to be the person that explains, I'm so proud of you that you saw that was wrong.
Yes.
That is the teacher's responsibility, not yours. They can
Yes.
handle that between you two, but if you try to kneel down right in front of everybody and be like, you're wrong, it's very confusing.
Absolutely. So I love that you point out that when we have those like discussions with kids in this age group, it's so important to do that face to face, like getting down on their level and talking to them, and doing it when we're no longer in an escalated state of emotion. It needs to happen when things are calm. So yeah, I love that. So
And there's so many tools that I think as a parent, maybe I'm just playing numbers here because I have so many kids. Like I can identify with all of the puzzles, but you know, as a parent, it's easy to start to feel hopeless. Like we just can't go anywhere. Like nobody wants to invite my kid. Like I am, but there definitely are tools to help these kids, whether there's an underlying medical diagnosis or they just are, it takes them a little longer, you know, to learn social cues. So there are tools, there are coping strategies that we can teach these kids and help them work through. So I would just encourage you, if you have a socially challenged kid like this, to definitely bring that up with your provider. Because a lot of times as parents, we're like, well, we go to the doctor for doctor things, but you know, so what that my kid throws cupcakes, you know, but there are lots of good avenues to help. So just reach out and ask for it, because I promise you're not alone.
yeah, for sure. Okay, you ready to move to our next one?
This one's a little squishy, but it's in there.
Oh yeah.
It's
Oh
not
yeah,
bad.
it is squishy
It's
on your
squishy.
screen.
Sorry.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so parents are called by the preschool due to multiple girls being mean and excluding your child. The teacher is concerned because they've noticed that your child does not seem to complain or stand up for herself appropriately. Anyone ever had this happen? Or gotten the call on the other side? Your child is being mean, or maybe even using the B word, bullying, or
Hitting or biting. Yep.
all the things. So yeah, this one is tough from both sides, no matter which parent you are. So on the one hand, if your child is the one being picked on and not saying anything, there could be a couple visceral reactions, right? The first is like, oh, that's right, she's not stooping to their level. And we are talking about preschoolers here, but we know families that have gotten this call in preschool, because preschool is such an important time to be learning those social skills. So we want to recognize these things. A lot of times this boils down to just an issue with learning communication and interaction skills, learning independence, that it's okay to say those things, because, I mean, we're all in this room because we're working hard to be good Christian parents. We want to teach our children grace. Your kid doesn't do it perfectly every day at preschool, and neither does Joni, who's the mean girl, right? And so part of us might be like, oh, she's just showing grace to Joni. And then after a couple months, you're like, wait a minute, what happens to my kid long term? What is she teaching herself? Does she just not feel worthy enough? Or like, well, Jenny's more important. If she wants to be mean, she can be mean. So that can be really hard on us, especially when they're little. We want them to learn self-advocacy. That's a big term for a preschool child when you're thinking of your preschooler, right? But we have ways to do that is developmentally appropriate. So in a big kid, self-advocacy might be in 9th grade, they're in algebra, they didn't understand the concept, they're super embarrassed, and we want them to raise their hand and be like, I did not understand that proof, right? That's self-advocacy at that age, in school, maybe. In this age group, it is learning when it's appropriate to go get an adult and be like, Joni's had the doll all morning. Every time I ask for it, she yells at me. that self-advocacy in that age group, learning to use their words, or saying to Joni, like, you're really hurting my feelings. Like, I would like a turn with the doll, or could we play the doll together? So in teaching that at a young age, and that it's important to be a strong communicator, again, using age-appropriate words, we are setting them up so that when they are in the 9th grade, it's not weird for them to be like, I didn't understand that proof, because they've been doing it at developmentally appropriate ways all throughout. Does that make sense? It's definitely a dance, parenting. I mean, that's the understatement of the century. But this is just one more place where we definitely see that. Because as Christian parents, we want to always be modeling forgiveness and grace, and that God made each of us differently, and we don't know what that child, has been exposed to. And we also want to raise children who will have a strong sense of self and confidence, will have strong communication skills, so that they can go out in the world and do what they are called to do as well. So that is a dance. We recognize that. But we feel like it's never too early to start learning those skills. Also, having communication with the teacher or the Sunday school, leader or whatever, not in a way to tattle on Joni, but to be like, what are you seeing there? And my daughter gets really nervous when that happens. Is there some kind of cue that we could come up with? Like, if she brings you the blue ball and hands it to you, that means I need help, or I need to talk to you over here, right? So even kids that are a little more reserved or quiet or nervous, there are ways to navigate that if you can be in communication with that teacher or that provider. So,
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah. So we would love to open it up for questions, and see what questions you guys may have, just regarding some of the parenting challenges that you're going through. Yes, go right ahead.
Puzzle number 6. Your child's name is Zeke, and he refused to eat dinner.
Ooh, okay.
For any food.
Okay.
is this just dinner, Zeke?
Just a random name.
Random name.
Yeah.
You're 3.
Yeah. So how
Randomly.
Oh man, nutrition, I think. So we did a lot of focus in our talk on a lot of the social development in kids in this age group. Also, there are so many topics, it's hard to decide which puzzles to do. So nutrition and potty were some of the other ones that were kind of in the backs of our minds. And there can be such a struggle with the dinner table, right? And so there are lots of different things that come to mind for me as a pediatrician. So when you give me that example, I have about 1,000 questions I need to ask you so that I can figure out, okay, this sounds like where I would go for this child, right? I think in general, in this age group, a lot of kids are in this kind of power struggle of, I will show you what I will and won't eat on my own terms, right? Because a lot of times there can be some stubbornness there. And it's also really natural for kids this age to feel nervous about trying new things. They don't like the way that broccoli feels like that on their tongue. And so they're just like, I don't like the way it looks. I don't want it on my plate. So there are lots of approaches to how can we get kids to do better with their nutrition, because I think all parents are hoping to, our most important things as parents are that we are providing love and shelter and warmth and nutrition, like all those basic human needs. And so
I think it's hard to, is it just dinner? Okay. I think it's hard too because as parents, I'll be the first to admit, we have this idea of what that's going to look like. Like, we are going to be good parents. We are going to sit down for dinner every night. We read that article We know that makes a difference on whether they're going to be in jail one day or not, as if they had dinner as a family every day. So you have that over here. And you want that. You're working your butt off for it. I mean, you would rather eat in peace too. Come on. And then on the other side, we have a preschool child who, he doesn't want to sit still. He doesn't want to hear about your day. There's 10 million things he wants. And he believes them to all be very important. And so how do we marry the two? Right? So obviously the common sense things we know, which is you're not going to have a bunch of snacks. You're not going to, get down and go play video games. All the you're nots. And we would love to have you here with us. That may or may not include eating. And we would like you here for as long as you can be here. And in your mind, obviously you're not telling them that. But you can even, if that is something that you've decided is a non-negotiable in our house. This is really important to us. And guess what? You get to decide that. You get to decide what's important in your family. Then you can come up with a reward system, a sticker chart. If you sit for 15 minutes, you get a sticker. If you sit through all of dinner, you get 2 stickers, and when you get 10 stickers, we're going to do this thing you really like to do. So that's okay to do rewards and to understand that you're not going to go from here to here in one night. So those would be my off the cuffs. Yes.
Question. Would you two be willing, along with others, if we can have a preschool conference?
Put us on the spot.
Because we're going to have that happen. I'm just going to put that in.
Yes, that'll be great. Did you have a question over here? I thought I saw a hand out of the corner of my eye. Okay, go ahead.
Training.
Yes.
Grandson's 4.
Mm-hmm.
He does number 1, excellent, but the other he doesn't want to use the pot.
Not quite getting it. Okay. Does he?
He knows what he's done though, because he comes and tells me.
Okay. Does he hide?
Yes.
Okay. So you can tell when he's got to go, or when he is going.
I can't tell.
Okay.
Sometimes I can, but I've been putting him like every 40 minutes or 45 minutes. Just
Okay.
to let him try,
Okay.
especially after he eats, and then he'll get off and
Gone. Okay.
does it.
So a few suggestions that I can share that are kind of specific to your situation. One of the strategies that we use in kids who are learning to go potty for number 2 is to allow them to leave their diaper or pull up on as they're figuring it out. So for kids who are like, I'm going to go hide behind the couch and I'm going to squat down, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Those kids, I would say, it looks like you might need to go number 2. Why don't we just do that in the bathroom? Because we do number 2 in the bathroom. So all you have to do is get the kid into the bathroom. Not on the potty, not naked, none of that stuff. Just in the bathroom, in the diaper. And then they start to associate, okay, number 2 happens in the bathroom. And then we teach them, you're going to sit while you do it, right? And so we take these little baby steps to kind of get them there.
So does he need to go back to a diaper then?
Is he going in his underwear?
Even his Paw Patrol
Those are the best. Yeah. Oh,
I'm gonna interject something as a mom.
Okay.
What I'm about to say is not sanctioned by my boss or any medical. But we had this issue happening. My last set of twins, one of them thought she was a puppy and she was just pooping the floor. She didn't want it in her pretty underwear. So I'd just be walking. We didn't have any dogs, y'all. I would be walking to go to the laundry room. I'd be like, what did I do? Like, we don't have a dog. I was losing my upper level mind. So it can backfire. Here's why that backfired a little bit, but it worked great for her twin sister. When she pooped in Cinderella underwear, I said, oh, I'm so sad that your Cinderella underwear is ruined. Oh, my goodness. Okay, I'm going to get stuff to clean up while you go throw them in the trash. And she was like, throw them in the trash. I was like, well, we can't put poo-poo in the washing machine. That's crazy. Then you can decide if you want to wash them out on your own later or not. But it worked great for her twin. It worked great for that one. I mean, she really was like, I am not pooping in Cinderella because she's out the door.
Yeah.
And her sister was like, I'll fix that. So it's a lot of trial and error, but it is so common at that age to perfect number one, and then number two is like,
Takes more time. Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of it is that kids just have to understand what that feeling is like in their body, because it feels very different in your body to sense, I need to go poop, versus to sense, oh, I've pooped my pants, right?
Shouldn't be scared.
If- And there's often a fear factor in kids, and that's where sometimes keeping the diaper on makes the potty less scary, because they feel vulnerable on the potty. So,
So I agree, we can be here the rest of the day.
Talking
Lots
about-
of great things. I think we can explore 100 more puzzles, but unfortunately we do have some other sessions to get to. So maybe contact information and stuff or whatever, but we have some gifts available here on the side, and then we also are going to go back to the sanctuary for session number 2. So thank you so
Okay,
much.
great.
This was
Yes,
wonderful.
of course. Yeah. Thanks for having us.
yeah.
We appreciate
And
it.
if you walk out of this room in 2 seconds with anything that you remember, I hope it's that you remember that you guys are doing great. I mean, the
Yeah.
fact that you came and sat in this room makes you a great parent. Mine wasn't updated, so
Oh, sorry.
that's okay.
Okay.
It does. It makes you a great parent. So you are not passing or failing at this based on one challenge. It just means you're alive and breathing, and you have kids. So, all right.
Yes.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Take care. Enjoy the day.